EJ, J. Jafari. I'm a candidate for clerk of Circuit Court of the City of Richmond. I wanted to take this opportunity to just have a little conversation with you. What would I bring different? What are some of the things that I may bring different to this job? Let me just explain briefly one of those avenues that I would bring into this. As I previously stated, the circuit court is a court of record. By that I mean their job is not general in nature. It has been specific for the 400 years that I've continuously referenced about courts in this region. It has been the circuit court's job to keep a precision record. I hold in my hand some of those records of historical nature. These particular documents document my family here. This particular date on this document here is from 1883, but the document itself actually lists my relatives, my forefathers here, before 1860. So these courts of record are very important. But if I might, when we talk about how any kind of corporation, and in this instance, this kind of agency and office is operated, we need to know that management starts and flows from the top down, and it never should be allowed to flow from the bottom up. Now, that's not to say that those people on the bottom should not influence the decisions made at the top, but when you start talking about customer service, congenial natures of offices, that's a temperament that must be set from the top down. Let me explain one aspect about that. Now, this document here followed the first document I showed you. Now, the date on this document is 1900. Now, when originally found, I don't know if you can see this, but this particular document has an ornate border on it, and that's one of the things that I found is common to those 1880, 1900 type recorded documents in our court system here. It was on this magnificent goldenrod paper, all original, had original signatures and certifications on it and everything. But here's where the attitude from the top begins to show as not being present in the customer service end. That is, where the service is actually delivered to the public. I'm looking at this from the standpoint of an average citizen who comes in off the street and is looking for service and is looking to research records about his ancestry. This document was ornate. As you see it is the way it was brought to me. Now, it had to be reduced, no question about that. So already the court does not have a way of reproducing these kinds of documents in a likeness of the manner in which they are maintained in the records. Now, what's the significance of that? Nowadays, people don't have a problem paying for services. As a matter of fact, as we look to our future and our elected officials, what everyday citizens like you and I are looking for are people who can look within your own confines and come up with not some kind of ingenious way of gouging us, but a way that complements what's already in the records and that presents these records to those who are seeking those records and copies of those records in a way that speaks to the way those original documents were recorded. Now, in the instant case, as ornate as the document was, it was brought back to me like this. As you can see, the bottom line of it has been cut off. And for myself, I pay a lot of attention to historic ways that the Virginia Code has changed over the centuries. And so for me, even that lower line of text was important. But even for a person that the lower line of text was not important, I think it's paramount that from the top down, when your subordinates go in and they bring a document out and they've copied it, I think it's incumbent upon them to give the document back to the seeker of the document in a way that does justice to the original itself. In other words, you need to be given a facsimile. This is not a facsimile of what I asked for. This is not a facsimile of what was pulled. This pales in comparison. And so after a brief, I had to pray on it. I had to sleep on, do I want to say anything? And if so, what's the proper way to go about saying it? The lady was cordial. You know, I can't hold it against her. She simply hasn't been taught that this kind of thing is necessary for good and 100% customer service and customer service delivery. She hasn't been taught that. See, that has to come from the top down. And the incumbent clerk simply has not espoused that in the court system. Now, what's some of the other aspects of it? Personally, I was ecstatic when they found the original. Looking at that document and seeing that we really have records that have been here, that's not something that has been promoted by the courts. So the courts have not come across as user-friendly, when in actuality, they could have been establishing a bond between the courts and the public to take away some of that stigma. And this is a small thing. It's one of a number of things that they could probably do, but the reality is this wasn't done. And so in this instance, when I went back the next day, I talked to the lady, and she looked at me, she said, "Can I help you? Certainly you're not back here to look for another record." And I mean, I smiled, of course, you know, but I was in there to talk about the record. I said, "No." I said, "Actually, you know what you gave me yesterday is not a facsimile of the actual document itself." I said, "You know, you cut off all of the bottom of the document, all the border, and I have no way of reproducing it." And so she looked at me and she said, "Well, do you need all of that?" And so I looked at her and I said, "Man, I really can't even believe that you asked me that." Yes, I need the document the same way my great-great-grandparents put the document into the record is the way I want the document. And so she looked at me strangely for a moment. And of course, I knew before going back in there that it's not something, you know, I can't hold it against her. It's simply the insensitivity with which that level of customer service has been viewed by the current clerks going back 400 years in this region. Whether or not people who seek these kinds of documents come in and get some reasonable facsimile of what was originally put in the record simply is not important to them. As your clerk, I'm going to make sure that this customer service aspect is delivered to you from the top down to the lowest person. And there's no low people in there anyway. But you have to train them in what is to be an acceptable and an unacceptable means of delivering service to the public. Now, another thing about this, I would have been willing to pay $15, $20 for a true copy on that type of goldenrod with that elaborate border around it. I would have been willing to pay $15 or $20 for it because it means that much to me. I understand that maybe some members of the public, the general public, wouldn't want to pay that much. But I'm of a growing consensus and a number of people who believe that this is something that we can do. And not only can we do it, it is a way of creating a self-renewing source of revenue. And that's what people nowadays want. When I talk to you about a vision and electing people who have a vision and have a justifiable way of making money and revenue off the services and records that we have, I think when we provide this kind of thing and people are aware and they can come into court and maybe work off some of that perceived angst about the court and go and do a little research, I think it'll do a lot towards bridging really some of the historical animals that exist between citizens and the courts. This is a conversation with Emmett J., candidate for Clerk of Circuit Court. I'll see you next time for another conversation. Take care.